Welcome to In the Hot Seat with the Tenney Group. I'm Spencer Tenney. It's good to be with you. What in the world is going on in the current talent acquisition market? I've got someone to have something to say about that today. With me, I have Brent Orsuga, founder of Pinnacle Growth Advisors. Brent, welcome to the Hot Seat.
Appreciate you having me on today. Excited to talk about this fun subject.
Yeah, you bet. So before we jump in and heat things up a little bit, why don't you just take 20, 30 seconds, just tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing at your firm.
Yeah, so again, Pinnacle Growth Advisors. Personally, I'm based out here in Scottsdale, Arizona. Done recruiting for 22 years, but the last 15 solely in logistics. So this is the only sport we play. Where we focus is in three areas. So we place people in number one, the asset side. Number two, we do a ton in 3PL brokerage. And then number three, we do a lot within freight technology. So think tracking, TMS, visibility. So we place hundreds of people a year within those three categories.
All right. You ready to heat it up?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. In 3 words, tell me, what are we experiencing right now in the current talent acquisition market?
I'm going to use 2 words, revenue drivers, right? So this is a completely different year than any other. Even if we go back to during kind of the COVID years, you got to remember in logistics, you had to service, not sell. So it got pretty easy when there's 100 boats out there in Long Beach. We really started to see the shift around last October, last November, if you remember, is when C.H. Robinson did their massive layoffs and the aftershocks that came after that. But this year was like none other. This year was all sales, sales, sales. It was very individual contributor driven, especially the first 6 months. If you really study the market, nobody was a coach anymore. It was all hands on deck. Everybody became a player. Everybody who was not performing got exposed. And so it has yet to really alter from that. It is still very, very sales heavy.
So let's unpack that a little bit. When you say exposed from a talent standpoint, what do you mean by that?
Sure. So I think that, look, COVID was a once in a century dynamic. There will be books written around what those 2 years were like. If you had a batch of sellers who came in during that time, you have to think about the environment that they were walking into. Things were very busy, very hectic. Everyone was an account manager in essence. You didn't really have to hunt for new business, especially if we talk about sales. So there was never truly a skill set learned, a proper onboarding. They weren't developed the way that I feel they should. There was really not a freight 101 type situation. So now what happens when you go from an extremely easy / hot market to a market like 2023, this for many people is the first hard market that they've had to go through. So now you have to ask, well, what are their skills to be able to navigate through this? Because selling on price is not a skill. And that's where a lot of people have struggled this year. And when I use the word exposed, it's for that reason. Really, they get exposed to the lack of skills that were trained or developed to them.
So I think this is, and I know and appreciate this as a business owner myself, it's very difficult to hire elite salespeople. And so what advice would you give? Because to your point, you got to have the real deal in this environment. So what advice do you give to folks who are going through that process? They don't really have a lot of margin for error. What should they be thinking about as part of that process?
Yeah, well, I mean, first and foremost, that's the universal theme of 2023. What I've said is if it's not a bullseye, it's not happening. Mm-hmm. See, the days of newbies, nice person, let's take a chance. Maybe I'll take a bet on this individual. I'll get a little creative. That's gone. There's a time and a place for that. Everybody is more than willing to pay, more than willing to hire, but that has got to fill a gap. It has to be what I'm going to call a plug and play situation. I think if I'm a company and I'm evaluating talent or how am I going about getting it, you have to realize first and foremost, here's the reality. The person you want is not probably on the bench. They're probably not on the sidelines. The reality is they're working for somebody else. So you internally have to ask yourself, how am I getting in front of that person? How am I tapping their shoulder? How am I getting the ability to even get on the phone with them and let them know that we're doing over here? See, you're either being proactive or reactive. Reactive to me is you post a job and it's post and pray, as I like to say, and you wait for people to come to you. Proactive is I'm taking a very aggressive approach, and I am a professional shoulder tapper. I'm contacting people. I'm emailing them, checking in with my network, seeing what's going on, because so much of recruiting is timing, and you want to be on the top of their mind when timing flips.
How do you sift through the nonsense of what's on a resume and people talking the good talk
Yeah.
versus actually being able to identify and be able to convey to one of your clients, hey, this guy's a winner?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think questions first and foremost. Interviewing is a skill. I think the reality is people don't necessarily work on that craft of interviewing enough to me. I think that a lot of times people just pass a face test. They may have some energy that they like and they make an assumption. A lot of this is like dating. A lot of people and a lot of companies make a decision within the first 30 seconds, and the rest of the time they're just spent justifying that decision. If we specifically focus on like freight and logistics, again, let's just stay on sellers. I'm asking very, very detailed questions and putting people on the spots. I want to know how they sell. I want to know how many accounts they have. I want to know how many accounts they brought on in the last 3 to 6 months. Because look, we live in a what have you done for me lately world. I want to understand their gross profit. I want to understand their load count. I want to understand, are they drive, flatbed, reefer? I just get very, very granular with people because what I'm trying to decipher is if somebody is a hunter versus a farmer. Mm-hmm. Just because you have a big book of business, well, was that inherited? Did you get that because someone left and now those are your accounts? Are you just riding off of the coattails of accounts that you brought on in 2018 and now you're just sitting back collecting commissions? So to me, it really just boils down to understanding detailed questions about the playbook. And then it's going to tell you everything you need to know about the player.
That's good stuff. So let me transition away kind of from your advice and counsel to the employer. Yep. And now to a very much expanded pool of available talent. Just based off these headlines. If we're talking about Yellow, we're talking about Convoy, but there's a lot of free agents out there right now. And,
yes.
And so, what advice are you giving to those folks who, some of the best talent in the industry is on the market right now? What advice are you giving to them in this current market?
Well, I think that they've realized this is a two-way street. Right? Because if I'm a seller, hey, I know what I can bring to the table. I know my relationships, my so-called book of business, whatever you want to call it. But now what we're seeing are completely different conversations. Think about this. Now conversations are coming up about the health of the organization. Where is the funding coming from? What are your credit scores? What is the runway to keep this train rolling? Those weren't questions that were asked 12, 18, 24 months ago. I don't know if it was the lack of education that people just didn't know to ask those questions, or if all these unfortunate misses have led to these individuals being more educated. Now, more so than ever, too, you have people that are educated around non-competes, non-solicits. People are more consciously aware of what they're signing than previously before, too. So there's just a different education that's occurred with the actual employee as well, where they're kind of knowing who they're going on these dates with much more. So more detailed questions are happening.
What do you see as some of the most critical needs? You've talked about salespeople, but what would be the next, going too deep on that? What are the next most critical positions that you see employers saying, I've got to have this person?
Yeah, I mean, again, it changes almost weekly, if not month by month. But I think number one, plug and play sales is always going to be there. But to me, that's 24/7, 365. In the last, I would even say 6 weeks, we have seen an uptick in what I'm going to call leadership positions. Now leading these sellers, leading the vision of the company. How are we going to navigate through these waters? You can call it a strategic type situation. Number three, I've seen even like pricing and RFP type individuals who have come into the play, because now when rates are starting to change and you have to analyze data on lanes and how are we going to maximize the relationships we have, that's coming to the forefront. Number four, account managers, right? Sometimes the best money you have is already in the accounts that you're servicing. Maybe you just go deeper, not wider with new accounts. So we've just started to kind of see that come to fruition as well. If there's a position that I've really, really seen thinned up, which is interesting to watch, it's on the carrier side. I've probably gotten 5 calls this year for carrier reps, and if so, it's one-offs. Because the whole industry changed from even an operational standpoint, whether it's bringing in technology, whether it's offshoring, there's just a real flux that's occurring within that one position too.
Interesting stuff there. So you mentioned leadership. Of course, leadership drives culture, and
Yep.
that's one of the things that I appreciate about you. You've got some very clear positions as it relates to culture,
Mhm.
and so I think that we could probably agree that there's a lot of ways to skin a cat. But I'm curious, specifically on this work from home
Mhm.
uh, philosophy, because there are thought leaders across the T&L space have very different positions and very strong leaders. So, what's your position?
Look, I'm a big believer of being in the office. I am. Because you have to remember, before COVID, too, there was always a formula that we all lived off of. Productivity gave you flexibility. If you produced, you got that option to be able to kind of work from home. Even then, it was not full time. March 16th, 2020, the world changed. Everybody got access to it. So, what do you think's going to happen? Of course, people are going to like it. They're going to get used to it. They're going to the gym during the day. It's easier to pick up your kids. Look, we're humans too. I get it. But from a standpoint of learning and growing, half of what you learn is by being in an office around other people. I'm a big believer in things are caught, not taught. If I'm sitting next to some high performers, I'm going to pick things up. I'm going to listen to them. I'm going to understand real life scenario conversations, not just through role playing over Zoom. In this industry specific is where we're going to stay and talk about. If I'm a seller, I want to be as close as I can be to my operations team. They're my right hand, right? We're a 1-2 combo. Pinging people over Teams and waiting for responses versus wheeling my chair around and getting some stuff done is a completely different dynamic. I think too, when it comes to leadership, if you want to lead people, it's hard enough to lead people in an office environment. Imagine trying to build a connection through Zoom. Because sales, recruiting, whatever you want to call it, is truly an exchange of energy. That's how you're going to lead people. You're going to drive people through kind of yourself and kind of what you're walking into the office with. It's just a much different dynamic than on remote or through electronics like this.
Well, for funsies, humor me. Argue the other side. What would be the benefits?
From a talent standpoint, look, if you're just in Chicago, just in Atlanta, just in Chattanooga, you're kind of working in more of a territory restrictive model, right? Hey, I got to go get the best in my backyard. Where if you go the other way, now you can tap yourself to really talent across the world or definitely the country. So it's
Mhm.
going to open you up to be able to get more people. But if you're going to go that path as a company, you have to have a proper infrastructure to train these people, onboard these people, manage these people. Because you have to remember too, even if we look at the remote dynamic, you really get managed two ways. And I think this is a huge disconnect out there too. If you're in an office, you get managed visually. I can see you, I can kind of understand what you're doing. If you're on the phone, your activity, your energy, all that stuff. If I can't do that, then I'm managing what I'm going to call electronically. So now when I'm managing through electronics, what am I looking for? I'm looking for CRM activity. I'm looking at talk time. I'm looking at, software that we've now implemented in the last 18 months to see what websites you're going to. So I think both sides got to understand and the expectations have to be lined as far as that goes. The eyeballs are going to be on you. They just come in different ways.
Who are some of your influences that, I know you're a big reader, but as
Yep.
far as actual leaders, either from the business world, from the sports world, who do you lean on in terms of this is kind of drives the way that I think about leadership and company culture?
Yeah, I mean, let's just look at high performers because those are the only people that I pay attention to. I want to study winners because they're going to leave success clues. I think even if you go back to the great Michael Jordan, The Last Dance, think about what he said, right? I lead from the front. I lead by example. I would never ask somebody to do something that I wouldn't do. Even if you look at an amazing podcast recently that was Tom Brady and Patrick Bet David, one of the things that he looked for was buy-in. He's going to invest his time into people, but it was kind of a mutual meet me halfway. I'll invest my time into you, but I need to know that you're bought in. I need to know that you're here too. So I kind of study leaders like that, excuse me. But from a leadership standpoint, from a culture standpoint, I always live off of 4 words. Five words. You are what you tolerate. That should be written in every office because it's so true. If you tolerate mediocrity, if you tolerate people being late, If you tolerate people not dressing properly and coming very loose to the office, that is your culture. It's very easy on the flip side to develop a culture of high performance, high expectations, and high standards. But you are what you tolerate as far as that goes. So you can't get mad at people if you tolerate that. Now, people can tolerate it from high performers, but you're also speaking to everyone else on the floor. You have to have high core values and high standards, and more importantly, be consistent with actually implementing them.
Going into 2024, what's going to be different? What are you thinking about as it relates to the talent market, and what can you share with us about it?
In a perfect spot to be able to talk to a lot of companies. We'll work with companies at 25 million, and we'll work with some of the billion-dollar logos within our industry and everything in between. So I see it from all different lenses. What I'm hearing is Q1 should be more of the same. I don't see a drastic spike within Q1. I think a lot of people are paying attention to Q1 when all these rates start to come up, and people are hoping that's going to be some changes. The other thing that I'm hearing too is, look, maybe some of this is a blessing in disguise. Even if we study the brokerage model, the reality was there was 18,000 brokerages plus. That's a lot of brokerages. So maybe some of this was a cleansing to a degree where the cream rises to the top, and it's actually going to make the industry better as well. So you got to always see the upside, not just the negative. But from a talent standpoint, to ask your question, I think in hard markets, which I think 24 will continue to be, I think we're still going to be high performers, revenue drivers, people that can turn on new business are going to be the ones in demand.
It's good stuff. So, where our worlds kind of collide, Brent, is really in the M&A in the M&A world, because some folks, when they're using mergers and acquisitions to solve a problem, and in many cases it's a talent problem. They know that they can't home grow the solutions to get where they want to go. So they can either go recruit and get that talent somewhere else from another organization, or they can go buy another organization. But here's what I'm interested in. What can owners do, or leadership organizations do, to determine whether or not that they have sufficient talent internally to get where they want to go? How do they make those assessments and make those hard decisions that have to be made?
Sure. Well, I'm going to first lean on something that you said. You're absolutely spot on. As far as scaling and getting to a bigger size, you got two options. You buy it or you build it, black or white. So I think that companies need to make that determination. What path are we going to go down? Are we going to kind of go down both paths, which is smart? But it's going to take a lot of conversations to also get that into motion. To answer your question around what should companies do, again, it goes back to what are you tolerating, right? Like if you are looking at your team, and we'll just again stay on the sales side, I play a lot there, but it dictates every other position. That's why sales is so important. It doesn't matter if you have operations, engineers, marketing, customer success, you can have all the best people there. If you don't have folks that can sell it, and none of that matters. Sales keeps the light on. So when you look at sales and actually what companies should be doing, look, numbers never lie. What you have to ask yourself is, what is tolerable here? What is acceptable? Is somebody doing 2, 3, 4 grand a month good enough? I recently made a video where also you kind of have to look at people and make a determination. I don't think this happens enough. Either you invest into coaching them up. I like this person. I like their attitude. They're good people. They show up on time. They're positive around the office. I'm going to take a bet on them. I'm going to coach them up for when the market flips. Or you look at somebody's activity. Activity tells me everything I need to know. And I'm coaching them out. It doesn't make them bad people. It just makes them a bad fit. And I think that's where a lot of companies struggle. They're too nice. But setting somebody up or keeping somebody too long is actually more detrimental to that human being, because they are not set up to win. So you're actually hurting them, not helping them. You actually should be freeing them up to find whatever it is that they're going to be good at. So I think there needs to be this negative annotation around firing. It's not really that. It's moving someone in the direction so that they can find what's a better fit for themselves.
That's some hard truth right there for a lot of leaders, but I hope that they're taking it in. Let's talk about Pinnacle for a minute. Tell us about the genesis of how, you mentioned that you've been in recruiting and talent acquisition for 22 years. I think that's what you said, but Pinnacle, maybe about half of that. So tell us about the genesis of how it came together and where you're headed as well.
Yeah, so really been in, I used to recruit within construction and was one of the top recruiters in the state of Arizona from like '03 to '08. So this was during the construction boom and everything else. And what I realized is I was really good at interacting with these human beings. I hate to say it, but it was kind of a guy's guy, blue collar type industry. It was very easy for me to relate. You know, you throw me in healthcare, you throw me with accountants, I don't know that I'm going to have that connection. And in '09, I actually partnered with somebody who was working in logistics, and this was my first exposure to it. I didn't know what a flatbed was. I didn't know LTL. But what I realized is those two industries, believe it or not, had a lot of symmetries. And then in 2014, I started Pinnacle, and it's just, you know, we've grown every single year. Next week, I'll actually be going to San Antonio to accept, as you see behind me, the Inc. 5000 award, which the only reason we get these things is because we help other people. We have one product. All I'm delivering is high caliber talent to high caliber companies. So from a company standpoint, if you ask me, what do I want to work with? Who do I want to align with? It's companies that have the proper core values, companies that have integrity, but more importantly, companies that are going to be an environment for people to win. Because when I pick somebody up, when I call somebody, and I'm coaching them through a career change, that is a huge impact on their lives, their family, and the trajectory of their future. That is not something I take lightly. I want to be someone that they remember opened a door for them, not somebody who led them down a wrong path for their own personal gain. It's not how I built this thing.
No, I think that's admirable. And for someone who uses recruiters regularly, it is an emotional thing. I mean, because you appreciate, it. You know, it's a responsibility. They're up in many cases. They're traveling. They're uprooting their whole life, because they believe what's been sold, what's been what's been packaged about what this deal is. And so I think that's a tremendous responsibility.
You know, and that's one of the things that I personally have taken the most pride in is every single company that we work with, partner with, I use that word, I have visited. That's a separator. I have walked into these offices. I have sat in the conference rooms where the people are going to sit to interview. I have met with leadership inside the office and outside the office. I've invested thousands of dollars to fly across the country, go to conferences, meet these people firsthand, because I've always lived off this motto. If I wouldn't work there, why in the heck would I take somebody in? See, right now, this is my biggest pet peeve around recruiters, not just in this industry, but in general. You have a lot of people selling something they know nothing about. You have a lot of people telling you how great a restaurant is they've never eaten at. That's self-serving. But when I can look at a company and tell you the whole backstory of the leadership, where they are, how they're built, their culture, because you got to understand, culture, you got to feel, you got to use your senses. What do I see, smell, touch, taste, and hear when I walk into that environment? That's where we've become dangerous, is because I could speak at such a high level to these companies we partner with.
I think we got about one more question, a little wild card for you, Brent. I want you to imagine young Brent coming out of college and thinking about his future. What piece of advice would you give to yourself, 22-year-old Brent at that time, about how to set yourself up for sustained success in whatever career path that is?
You know, work ethic has always been a separator for me, whether it be through sports or whether it be through business. So I've always lived, and I would tell anybody at that age, not just myself, especially if we're talking in the corporate environment, be the first person in, be the last one to go, be in front of your leadership team, dress the nicest. See, these are all individual things that you can control, not somebody else. So why would you not take great pride in your presentation? Number one. Number two, work more on yourself outside of the office. Nowadays, we live in a world where there's more information available to this younger generation than ever before. I remember growing up, I'm 46 now. I used to have Tony Robbins CDs that I used to have above my sun visor that I would listen to. Nowadays, these kids have free podcasts, books all over the place, YouTube where they can learn. And rather than spend your time, because look, we're all on social media. None of us are not on there. But what are you consuming is what I would ask. Right. Are you consuming and spending your time educating yourself and feeding your brain with positive stuff? or you just watching and looking on Facebook to what your friends from 20 years ago are doing that impact your life in zero capacity. So there's a lot that I would embrace more, but it's actually stuff that I actually still implement to this day, to be honest with you.
Well, I think that's great. Young Brent's pretty wise. I would say that's. Well, hey, listen, man, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, sharing your wisdom and insights into the market right now. That's going to do it for us in the hot seat. We will see you next time.